Former gourd boarders and helmet glazers united Friday night for a scene at the downtown Merle Howerton, like seldom hath been seen in modernized era. We blanked out for a second, and soon a massive turtle absconded, proving us wrong. We spied a I and an AI, sty and mine eye. I placed a whirlwind in my hayloft and the psycho chunked it up, spanning a banquet rank. Basement Jeter crawled out of some kind of viaduct, but it spelled it wrong in the report, so Glenk said he walked. They called up Attic Alphonse, but he had changed his name to Grimp Limpener, and no longer held his electrician's license this side of the Kernable border. He lived in a street camp up the road from a path coward. A manhole hit a man inside, but the whole man leaked his parts out from too sciency a fissure, and we had fled in terror before the anger transmitted via his gaze. His iris starts from about 8:99 in the morning, running through 9:88 at night, and he spools Hoards for his money. He starts at the back of the shop before the crack of dawn, and by the angel dust of the dusk, he smacks his father with each farthing he's earned down at the spooling plant and hoards his lungs to criminal crawls and lozenge bag headaches he had been getting since he was a little boy, prowling the Grange in his 4x40, clutching run-down mixing whisks in each hand and steering with his elbows. He has a crease in his fingertips and lobed ears, but he sifts the digits through night and day in exchange for the false belief cradle he'd been hobbled with by his creator, Overall Nitrogen James, whom wanted to be known by Jim, but it never caught on, unlike the grappling hook he used to escape Halogen Joe. I crept in a doorway and leaped into action and slept on it for a bit while I slept. I had a beef radish that defied modern science, with experts at George City Galaxiversity stating it was clearly from a future timeline. But the day before the science hearing, they vanished into a slash vehicle that was mating with toxic doctors even as it crowded in on itself. I had to bark into a tree to convince an owl the moon was inside. It made my heart break a little seeing him crawl in so that the dark god of the wood could eat him from the inside out in a single slap of my tentacle. I mean his tentacle. Craw Robbins filed up some drench lectures, and when he had been groaning from the inside, he had a bit of a peek preview of how hard his previous pet peeves had been bereaving him from beyond the glaive. Side-sweeping aside his 80s, I stepped on my dreams in a revelatory fashion show, and my sequined cellular sequence was thus embroidered. Ricochet Jason bounced from tower to tower with inveterate haste to annul his veteran status. Cans of paper, belts of rubber, and pectin basins solidified outward. Paper sanders rinsed and repeated above me. Crowns of canyons dripping from tiny brachiating cracks in its ceiling. And I grew certain I would purse my lips and invent a new treachery to tickle my brace viper and ignite my kettle crow into a flying flame. I set my passenger pigeon to carrier mode, kicking them out of sync with my car's passenger seat and using them to transmit the frequency-modulated digital signal necessary to operate at 88 miles per hectare. We had covered a sinister discus event with the grace of an acrobat, but we didn't have a big enough surface area to block the pole jump without getting pierced by the pole itself. Odometer Pete came up with the perfect solution: 2 parts vinegar, 3 parts hibiscus pollen. That, when boiled in an Erlenmeyer flask at 420 marijuanas for 62 parsecs at a rate of 17 feet, but not per anything, for an average volume of 6 non-units and a standard mass of Latin at 65. A look back at the language that made me forget math. Once we slapped some of that behind Pete's ears, he went as quiet as a ghost, and the only part of him we could still see was his titular odometer. His eponymous self was released under the same thing he actually included in his fan. Triple-bladed, Quadruple-breaded interest ever accruing, he tumbled out of Bumbletown with a brash proposal. 3 new nibs for his stellar squib, or he would fax the home service. We had no choice but to oblige, holding his head under the water until he could clearly see his stars with his bare eyes. This, we allowed, was proper science, and I had an article of clothing. But when I went to purchase the news magazine off the stand the next morning, it had been edited beyond recognition by my one-time ally and current Bordeaux, France, Oil Can Thomas. I set out immediately to his Northampton flat to make it bumpy, but halfway through my stroll, it stole across me that I might be able to cross him without crossing the Thames. Thematically strong, I strode into the nearest strudel deli and launched into the broadside of a barn with a series of shiver commitments eliciting catering contracts in the name of one Oil Can Thomas Thompson, signing his name with a little thwomp like the man himself, that pompous braggart. I, though sluggish, were no laggard, so I slugged onward to my final destination, a diner finer than any sine wave I have ever elevated. I venerate fine architecture on my Wemresevai. Churhansi Vesara. I never fue ara. Sapri Fusla. Boslal. Padai. Trottider. As it crane heute Mari Sasank. Near. Krusk, that's when it happened. Batty Binder clamped around the corner, spouting orders. He commanded me to hors d'oeuvres myself with a wire lever, and then lavage the lever to expunge the filth. By order of Teacup Randy, halt thy forward advance and reduce yourself to silent. Now I knew I had my old quarry right where I wanted it. You have me mistaken with somebody else. I'm known to Teacup Randy by other names. This seemed to arrest his attention and wrest control of the situation from him. And those names might be, he inquired, lowering his spatulate limbs. They might, at that, I replied, dervishing the whisk branders I had secreted about my person, and when his eyes went wide with recognition, his nose went narrow with insolence, and I felt not one slight twinge of empathy as the whirling whisks risked his life. He flew to the 4 winds with gristle and grand openings of Roman candle-holding Greek lantern establishments. I crumbled him up fully and dropped a calling card on the closest glob of remaining goo and gore. Oil Can Thomas does not take threats lightly, and I make threats lightly. So, Isatik Saure hinin nanosan, Aita Drinty. The sets, this band. Did I feel bad for striking at Teacup Randy's crew just to make them defeat Oil Can for me? Does a baby shit on a bear? How do you think I felt? Cradling the dead raven in my neck and weeping openly. Each falling tear resurrected the dead prince into a living lint beast in regal garb, gabbling onwards about ballast hampers and batch-hassling latches and bleach breeches and brine-boating barbules and barbiturates. Blimp hangars filled with hotel hangars, filled with hangars on blimp hotels and blimping out their road-scrotal tokens, and totem folks, folk totems, token roots, and rotary Tolkien forts, folk forkings, token folgers, fold tokers, totem folders, root fakers, rake frighteners, light tort reform and formal token folder rogans, road folder forking, boulder rattles with stake wranglers, folk winding bolt rowers, roofle torsion boat floaters, folk fission brew rotors, nor Lickenbadge fortress choking token chalking, chafing ranges, rage forging broken dorms, dormitory fold brightening northward coping, bolt forge normal erosion, focal borders, bridge barriers, cup-holding grift thickness, ordinary boat coaching motions, lotion caching cash rations, rational graph wrapping, cock choppers, chapped flesh massing hatches, and coffer totals. He cried foul at the mode of full-throated radial boot moon cuticle tuckers, and coach-delving motion huddles crunched fuzzy and friable in the far reaches of the oat-braising, glazed ladle indemnity. Cradles and launch frisson issues in the shoe frolicking among the follicle-draining, traipse reticle rowboat tokens and vulcanized cradle debasement ridges and aversion disbursements. He cobbled some crab and crawdad creation together by sheer lip power, and his mouth felt as dead as the Adirondacks on a Doonesbury comic strip that never should have achieved syndication. The cradle-hopping Craddock had cod stalked his paddock, but never cantered over to take a closer look. This provided the opening that the soap-softening boy never knew he needed. He stole to the center of the ocean in an unsuitable basin, and was worsted. It came as quite a surprise to all the dead men in the center of the sea that they had all been slain by the Lord our God. Make most righteous balsamic vinaigrette, or regret ye ever after, he cried. In a Pinochet riot, only the most viscous indices give rise to sparse perceptions, and with a degree of lasciviousness only intermittently achieved, I sought to attain full perestroika with my own variations, oinking at the moon like a well-oiled lunar boar, belting out the song I could still recall from the age of days and the spinning span wheel of time. Rock a socket. Pile up a pill packer that produces product more evasively than 6-wire bracelets gone rotten to God, gleaming and glistening like a twisting queen. Do you swipe the vituperous viper, or wipe yourself with the glutinous glaze of grazing cattle? Like a lot of swatters with your flies. Or do you ride with dirty diapers dangling down like fuzzy dice to attract the dipteran mites to you with all dispatch? Clasp the maggots to your beating heart, unaware of their attraction to foul meat, and look at you now, all stuporous and bloated from torpor. One broader bonnet bestride me, and I'm back in the barnyard. All the solar brushery or wire gronasing for up the color summer. Years fall away, and I am small and gay, wrapped in hay, and letting the farmhand have his way. Oh man, what more can I say? I am a vellum orit with horrid-ish, scrape me clean, by which time I should be more able to stay sane and stable, and morbidity would be more unavailable. My clavicle your vents, you unassailable wench, wretched in your deft resting of cleft chin wrenches and best tin cyborg warrior princess. Slander pampers and chlorine whiskers at the ready, mom spuggety. Ketchup muffins and sponge doublers and juggle window dressing on my salad never made a pit roast of difference in the Ipswich double-clipping committee. As outrigging of dimple rigging and pestle globules and porking shrimp. He had clattered to the ground with a smattering of pimples and diseased line of ball-bearing boring clasps and clampening pulleys, clittering through the crisis cat litter like shriek ministers and flaying bishops. He had harpoons strung up and ready to fire tiny harps at the whale sharks, but the order never came. He climbed off the cliff edge and knifed himself raw in the shower before the second eclipse of his totality overrose him and overrode his finished filigree with a rutting stutter dust-up and clip-on demonstrable harm wobbles and chip-whiffling balls that clapped together like bouncy butts in the night as the Clamato factory pumps bagels full of bagged hair and barber waist and waters down waffles with railing rifles and whirlpool wordle burns and backstabbing flash molting and molten coldness folders full of metric boulder hashes and crashing car clips shaved off a few by extra seconds each time in the windowless room where you harbor all wand flooding. Tantric sleep waffles and war raffles ruffling each fringe feather and feature frond for foraging friends. You never felt the need to fondle even now. Has this crass destiny clipped its own wings, or do we hate limping around like a loyal Stevens with a mini rock and a sandy rock? And that's all this is. Does wire bill clash with braid flanges in the shoreline? Or is the city site a soulless sentiment in all regions, legionary legends and flesh-lessening leech trenches, breech benches with trash roaches and filth beaches, and broach-toasting belch broilers and toil wideners and film builders who limn their bins with liner, and pack their cans with spoiled ham and harm glands of beef-deafening roast brazings and glazed razor landowners with laser canyons, and holographic trouser noodles on ice for the Lord in 1662. I had the ocean, but it were green in those days, and I slayed my overstayed visa because it was everywhere I wanted to be. Rawling topiary and clem hobo bobo, and crench bobo ho bobo go boo. Won't be rolling to dinner this evening, Crabman, Jack, and James, because Captains Pierce and Honeycutt gotta get rowing if they want to reach Shoreman Drive by 5:30 on the White River, blotting out the sun like a squid of light itself, drenched in feral bellhop appendages and cleaving old tinder and tenterhooks out of cream vegetables a la Decus adapters and adaptation cluck-busking steam weasel cleaners and beam harpoon happening management, which still clamps up to this day. To this very day, mind you.